So I've been seeing reports around what people think could be next for Canelo, following, of course, that loss against Terence Crawford in a 12-round decision in a huge fight, a huge money fight on Netflix. Canelo was fundamentally and thoroughly, comfortably outboxed by Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford did pretty much whatever he needed to do to win those rounds against Canelo. Used his feet great, mixed it up to the head and to the body, held his ground when he needed to, moved about when he needed to. And Canelo never really had a chance in that fight. Once we got to the third, fourth, fifth round, I saw that, yeah, Crawford's winning this fight pretty easily. That being said, Canelo is a step slower than what he was in his prime. He's, yeah, like I said, I would say he's a step slower. I would say the power that we've been seeing from Canelo the past couple of years is about what his power is going to be until the end of his career at this point. He's not a disastrous puncher the same way he was pre-2021, pre-2022, right? But yeah, still in my opinion, one of the top guys at 168. And with some good matchmaking, could even become a top guy at 175 again. And those are really the two routes I want to talk about in terms of Canelo. Because I think those are the two most likely routes for him. I think he could stay at 168 or he can move back up to 175. And people are saying, why would he move back up to 175? And if I'm being honest, there is quite a clear route for him to get another world title shot at 175. And of course, with a world title fight comes more money, right? So if I was Canelo, I wanted to move up to 175 again. First move would be, you still want a fight who is still a big name and still pay you a lot of money, obviously. Of course, because Canelo doesn't seem the type of guy to want to go back to the drawing board now and fight some lower ranked opponents. Canelo's going to want to, if he's going to continue for these next two fights, he's going to want to be in there with the biggest, baddest guys he can be in there with and make the most money and still winnable fights, right? Which is why I'm saying his first fight, whether this first fight is at 175 or 168, they're both going to be winnable fights. I don't see Canelo losing two fights back-to-back, right? So his first fight at 175, in my opinion, would be Callum Smith, a guy who he's already beat at 168. And in my opinion, Callum Smith is still a very good boxer and is better at 175 than he was at 168, in my opinion. In terms of, punch resistance and all these things. I think he's matured well into his body at 175. I still think Canelo could beat him, though. And he's an interim champion. So if that fight was to take place for an interim championship belt, Canelo would become the interim champion and he'd be next in line to fight, I believe, Dimitri Bivol. I believe it's a WBO interim title that Callum Smith holds. He wins that. He's then next in line to fight Bivol for a WBO mandatory, right? That takes us into that Bivol fight where he probably loses again. But again, you look at the top guys at 175. You look at Bivol, Beterbiev, and Benavidez. Bivol is the safest fight out of those three guys. Because I think he loses to all three of those guys. Let's have it right. But Beterbiev and Benavidez, they could maybe stop Canelo at that point in his career. They can maybe stop him, right? Whereas Bivol, I don't think Bivol's really got that in him to stop a Canelo. He'll outbox him thoroughly, like he did the first time, and he'll put it on him, but I don't think he'll stop him, right? In which case, Canelo could retire fighting for a light heavyweight championship once again. Alternatively, at 168, his next fight would be against Chris Eubank Jr. in a fight that, honestly, it is somewhat of a dangerous fight, but just because Chris Eubank Jr. is always going to give it his all, he's always going to absolutely come to fight, always going to be ready to go to war. But I think Canelo will be able to quite easily outbox Chris Eubank Jr. because he is very sloppy. He is still very sloppy and he's not got any better recently. If anything, he's got more sloppy because he's gotten slower and all these things, right? Whereas when he was younger, his speed could really make up for these things. His speed could really make up for these things. That speed's gone now. But of course, it's Chris Eubank Jr., so he's still a huge name in the sport. So Canelo could come to London. That fight would sell out Wembley. Chris Eubank Jr. v Canelo would sell out Wembley, would sell out Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Easily, in my opinion. So you got Canelo, he wins that fight. And then he goes on to fight probably Hamza Shiraz. And this is a Hamza Sheeraz who at this point would be, undoubtedly in his prime at 168. And again, that's a fight I think he loses. I think if a prime Canelo fights a prime Sheeraz, prime Canelo does win that fight. But we're putting a Canelo who's literally going to be at the end of his career against a prime Sheeraz. It's hard to see because Sheeraz is so long, and we saw what he did to Belanga. He's clearly got power, and Canelo at that point, even though he'd still be harder to hit than your average boxer because he's still defensively so elusive, he'll be a lot more hittable than he was in his prime. And I think Sheeraz is going to make the most of that. And I think Sheeraz would beat him if they were to fight. Because not only, you would have a Canelo who would have beaten Chris Eubank Jr., but there would have been miles on the clock from that fight. Chris Eubank Jr. is not going out. He's not no easy customer. Nor's Callum Smith, but Chris Eubank Jr. he's up for a tear-up. Again, so is Callum Smith. We saw it with Boatsi. Both guys are going to put miles on that clock, even though I think Canelo will win those fights. They would put miles on the clock. So yeah, I'd be curious to know what you guys think of what's next for Canelo. Do you think he could have a feature at 175, or do you think he should stay at 168 and sort of see how it plays out there? Be curious to know what you guys think in the comments below. Another episode of the Seth Solo Sidequest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.